chosen one. After this happens, your family will finally understand why God chose you. Stop for a moment. Before you scroll away, before you tell yourself that this is just another message, listen to these next few words carefully. There is a version of your life that your family knows. They know the person you used to be. They remember your struggles. They remember the seasons when you were uncertain. They remember the moments when you had to start over. They remember the times you were quiet when everyone else was moving forward. They remember the version of you that had questions, limitations, disappointments, and dreams that seemed too far away. But what they may not understand is that the person they remember may not be the person you are becoming. And that is exactly where this message begins. Because sometimes the greatest change in your life does not arrive with an announcement. It does not knock on the door and introduce itself. It begins quietly. A change in your thinking, a change in your priorities, a change in what you are willing to tolerate, a change in what you no longer chase, a change in what no longer controls your emotions. And then one day, the people around you look at you and realize you are different. But there is a deeper question. Why did it have to happen this way? Why? Did you have to go through seasons where people misunderstood you? Why did certain relationships change? Why did certain doors close? Why did you sometimes feel like you were moving forward while everyone around you thought you were standing still? And perhaps the answer is not that your life was falling apart. Perhaps you were being separated from the version of yourself that could not carry the next chapter. Think about that. What if some of the things you called delays were actually preparation? What if some of the silence you experienced gave you space to hear yourself again? What if the season that made you feel forgotten was also the season that forced you to discover what truly mattered? Because there is something about transformation that most people misunderstand. Transformation rarely looks impressive while it is happening. From the outside, preparation can look like isolation. Growth can look like distance. Healing can look like silence. Discipline can look like boredom. And becoming stronger can look like losing people who were only comfortable with the weaker version of you. That is why your family may not understand the change immediately. They have a picture of you in their minds, and people often respond to the picture they have of you, not the person you are becoming. Maybe they still expect you to react the old way. Maybe they still expect you to explain yourself. Maybe they still expect you to seek their approval. Maybe they still expect you to return to old habits whenever life becomes difficult. But what happens when you stop? What happens when you finally become comfortable with your own growth? What happens when you no longer need everyone to understand your journey before you continue walking it? That is when something changes, not only around you, inside you, and that internal shift may become the very thing that eventually changes how your family sees you, because real elevation is not simply about having more, it is about becoming more capable of carrying what you once prayed for. More patience, more wisdom, more self-control, more clarity, more courage, more peace, and perhaps most importantly, less need to prove yourself. There is a point in life where you realize that proving yourself to everyone is exhausting. You do not need to convince every person who doubted you. You do not need to argue with every person who misunderstood you. You do not need to announce every plan. You do not need to defend every decision. Sometimes the strongest response is simply to keep becoming, quietly, consistently, faithfully. And this is where the title becomes important. After this happens, your family will finally understand why God chose you. Notice the wording. It does not say they will understand because you explained everything perfectly. It does not say they will understand because you finally won an argument. It does not say they will understand because you forced them to believe in you. It says they may understand after something happens, something visible, something undeniable to them. something that allows them to look backward and connect the pieces. The struggle, the waiting, the changes, the discipline, the closed doors, the unexpected turns, the moments when you felt alone. Suddenly, what once looked confusing begins to make sense, and that is the curiosity we need to explore. What exactly could make the people closest to you finally see the journey differently? Is it money? Is it success? Is it recognition? Is it a breakthrough? Maybe. But the deeper answer may be much bigger than any material achievement, because if your transformation depends entirely on something external, then the moment that external thing disappears, so does your confidence. Real transformation begins before the results become visible. That is why the first sign may not be something your family can see. It may be something you notice first. You stop begging for attention. You stop forcing connections. You stop chasing people who consistently make you question your worth. You stop explaining your dreams to people committed to misunderstanding them. You stop allowing someone else's opinion to determine your direction. And strangely enough, that is often when your life starts becoming quieter. But do not mistake quietness for emptiness. A quiet season can be full of movement. Seeds grow underground before anyone sees a tree. Roots develop in darkness before branches reach the sky. The foundation of a building is created before anyone admires the structure. And perhaps your current season has more foundation in it than you realize. So if you have been feeling like something inside you is changing, do not rush to label it. Pay attention to it. Ask yourself, what am I no longer willing to carry? What kind of person am I becoming? What patterns am I finally breaking? What have I learned from the seasons that hurt me? And what if the person you are becoming is precisely why some people no longer recognize your choices? That does not automatically mean everyone around you is against you. It means growth changes perspective, and sometimes two people can love each other while standing at completely different stages of understanding. Your family may not see what you see yet. That does not mean your journey has no value. It simply means they are looking at the chapter you are currently living, while you are beginning to understand the story as a whole. And there is another layer. Sometimes the people closest to us become accustomed to our limitations, not because they are evil, not because they want us to fail, but because they have watched us struggle for so long that they unconsciously build an identity around that struggle. They become used to you being the one who needs help, the one who is figuring things out, the one who is trying again, the one who is still searching. So when you begin to become stable, confident, focused, and disciplined, it can surprise them. When your behavior changes, they may wonder what happened. When your priorities change, they may question you. When you stop reacting emotionally, they may think you have become distant. But sometimes what looks like distance is simply maturity. You are not necessarily becoming colder. You may simply be becoming clearer, and clarity changes everything. If you have experienced a season where you suddenly became less interested in explaining yourself and more interested in building your life, tell me in the comments what changed for you. You do not have to tell your whole story. Even one word is enough, because there is power in recognizing your own growth. Now here is where this becomes even more interesting. The biggest change may not be the moment your family sees your success. It may be the moment they realize your success was not the point. The point was who you had to become to reach it. Because imagine someone seeing you years from now and saying, "I never understood why you had to go through all of that." And you look back and realize you did not have the answer then either. You only had enough strength for the next step, one decision, one difficult morning, one uncomfortable conversation, one closed door, one opportunity, one more attempt. And that is how transformation often happens, not all at once, piece by piece, choice by choice, day by day. Perhaps that is why your story cannot be measured by one difficult season. A chapter is not the entire book. A setback is not your identity. A delay is not a permanent destination. and someone's old opinion of you does not have to become your future. But there is something else you need to understand. When people see a sudden rise, they usually see the result. They do not see the invisible years that produced it. They see confidence. They do not see the nights when you doubted yourself. They see discipline. They do not see the habits you had to build. They see peace. They do not see the battles you had to stop participating in. They see the new person. They do not see how many versions of you had to end first. And perhaps that is why your rise may shock people. Not because you suddenly became someone else, but because you finally became more fully yourself. There is a difference. You are not becoming valuable because you succeeded. You are learning to recognize the value that was already there. And when that recognition becomes internal, your decisions change. You no longer live just to impress people. You live with purpose. You no longer chase every opportunity. You learn to recognize the right opportunity. You no longer respond to every criticism. You learn what deserves your attention. You no longer panic when something leaves. You begin asking whether it was ever meant to stay. That is maturity. That is growth. And if you believe that your next chapter requires a different version of you, not because words magically change your life, but because sometimes you need to hear yourself acknowledge the decision you have been avoiding, the decision to stop living as the old version of yourself. Now maybe your family has already started noticing. Maybe someone has said, "You have changed." Maybe someone has asked why you are quieter. Maybe someone has noticed that you do not react the way you used to. Maybe they cannot explain what is different, but they can feel it. And that is often the beginning. Because before people recognize your results, they recognize your energy. Before they recognize your new life, they recognize your new boundaries. Before they recognize your elevation, they recognize your new standards. And this brings us to the next part of the story. Because if your family is going to understand the journey, they will eventually have to see something that connects the past with the present. They will have to see that what looked like rejection may have been redirection. What looked like a delay may have been preparation. What looked like isolation may have created clarity, and what looked like an ordinary struggle may have been the training ground for something much greater. But what is that something? What changes first? What signs reveal that the new season is actually beginning? And why does the transformation often happen privately before it becomes visible publicly? Stay with this message, because that is where the deeper part begins. There comes a moment when a person stops asking, "When will everyone finally believe in me?" and starts asking, "Am I willing to believe in the path I am walking even when nobody else understands it?" That question changes everything. Because your life cannot be controlled by the approval of people who are not living your journey. Your family may love you deeply. Your friends may care about you. The people around you may genuinely want the best for you, but they still cannot see everything you see. They do not live inside your thoughts. They do not feel every conviction. They do not experience every internal battle. They do not know every reason you decided to change. And that is why you should not demand immediate understanding. Give people time to witness the transformation. Let your consistency speak. Let your character speak. Let your results speak when the time comes. Because there is a kind of success that needs no announcement. It simply becomes visible. One day, someone who once questioned your direction notices that you are calmer. Another day, they notice that you are more focused. Then, they notice that you are no longer constantly struggling with the same problems. Then they notice that you have developed something they cannot easily explain: stability, wisdom, discipline, peace. And eventually they may ask, "What happened to you?" And perhaps your answer will not be a dramatic speech. Maybe you will simply say, "I decided to become intentional about my life." That answer may sound simple, but they will not know how much it cost you to reach that sentence, because every transformation has a price. You had to release something. Maybe an old habit, maybe an old identity, maybe an old expectation, maybe the need to be understood, maybe the fear of disappointing people, maybe the belief that you had to remain small to keep everyone comfortable. And this is one of the hardest lessons of growth. Sometimes people are comfortable with your potential as long as your potential remains potential. They can celebrate your dreams because dreams do not challenge the existing order. But when you start acting on those dreams, everything changes. When you start saying no, when you start building, when you start improving, when you start becoming disciplined, when you start making decisions that your old self would never have made, people may notice, and some may not know how to respond. Do not immediately interpret that discomfort as hatred. Sometimes people simply need time to update their understanding of you. They knew version 1, you are becoming version 2, and version 2 may not behave according to the rules version 1 lived by. That is okay. Your growth does not require anyone else's permission, but here is the deeper spiritual question. What if the season of being misunderstood was teaching you something about identity? Because if everyone always understood you, you might have learned to live for their approval. If everyone agreed with your decisions, you might never have developed conviction. If every door opened immediately, you might never have learned patience. If every dream arrived quickly, you might never have learned stewardship. Sometimes the waiting teaches you how to carry the answer. Sometimes the difficulty teaches you how to protect what comes next. Sometimes the disappointment teaches you what you actually value. And sometimes the people who leave your life teach you what you should never again compromise. That is why your past should not only be remembered as pain. It can also be understood as information. Your experiences taught you, your mistakes taught you, your failures taught you, your disappointments taught you, your lonely seasons taught you. And now you get to decide what you do with what they taught you. This is where the rise becomes different. A true rise is not simply moving upward, it is moving forward with greater understanding. You do not rise just because life becomes easier. You rise because you become stronger at navigating life. You become harder to manipulate, harder to distract, harder to pull back into old patterns. You begin recognizing what costs your peace. You begin recognizing what deserves your energy. You begin recognizing when an opportunity is aligned with your values and when it is simply attractive. And suddenly, you become selective. That selectiveness may confuse people who knew the old you, but it is not arrogance, it can be wisdom. You do not need every door. You need the right doors. You do not need everyone's approval. You need alignment with what you believe your purpose requires. And perhaps this is one of the clearest signs of the transformation promised by the title. Your family may not first recognize your achievements. They may first recognize your mindset. They may notice that you are no longer controlled by the same fears. They may notice that criticism does not destroy you. They may notice that disappointment does not make you quit. They may notice that you recover faster. They may notice that you think before reacting. They may notice that you no longer need to announce everything. And then they begin to understand not everything had to happen immediately. Not every delay was meaningless. Not every closed door was punishment. Some things simply needed to end so something else could begin. Think about the last time something you desperately wanted did not work out. At the time, perhaps it felt like loss. But today, with more distance, can you see anything differently? Can you see how that ending redirected you? Can you see how it changed your standards? Can you see how it pushed you towards something you would never have chosen on your own? This does not mean every painful event was sent to you. Life is complicated. People make choices. Circumstances change. But even within uncertainty, you can choose what meaning you will carry forward. And that choice is powerful. You can allow your past to become a prison, or you can allow it to become preparation. You can keep asking why it happened, or eventually begin asking what it taught you. That question can change your entire future, and perhaps this is why your family will eventually understand something important. They may realize that the person they thought was simply struggling was actually learning. The person they thought was lost was actually searching. The person they thought was behind was building a foundation. The person they thought was too sensitive was learning discernment. The person they thought needed everyone else was learning how to stand independently. And the person they thought would remain the same changed, not overnight, but completely. There may also come a moment when something external finally confirms what you have been building internally. A new opportunity, a career change, a financial improvement, a creative breakthrough, a healthier relationship, a new level of confidence, a project that finally works, a goal that finally moves, a door that opens at the right time. But remember this: do not make the external result your only proof. Because if you do, you will miss the deeper miracle of transformation. The greatest evidence may be the person standing in the mirror, the person who no longer needs to return to the old life just because it feels familiar, the person who can walk away from what once controlled them, the person who can say, "I forgive what happened, but I will not rebuild my identity around it." That is powerful. And perhaps that is what your family will eventually recognize, not simply that you became successful, but that you became whole. There is a difference between being admired and being grounded. There is a difference between being noticed and being fulfilled. There is a difference between proving people wrong and becoming right with yourself. Your rise should not be revenge. It should be alignment. It should not be about making someone regret underestimating you. It should be about becoming someone who no longer needs their regret. That is freedom. And if there is one thing I want you to remember from this entire message, it is this: do not shrink your future just because someone is comfortable with your past. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to discover new strengths. You are allowed to build a life that looks different from the one people expected. And if your family needs time to understand that, give them time. You do not have to force the revelation. Let life reveal it. Let consistency reveal it. Let your character reveal it. Let your choices reveal it, because eventually people often understand what explanations could never communicate. What changed inside you? Your answer might be exactly the reminder someone else needs today. And now, let us return to the title one final time. After this happens, your family will finally understand why God chose you. Maybe this is not one single event. Maybe this is the moment your life begins reflecting the person you have been becoming. Maybe it is the moment your discipline produces results. Maybe it is the moment your patience finally produces clarity. Maybe it is the moment you stop repeating the same cycle. Maybe it is the moment you build something meaningful. Maybe it is the moment you become so secure in your identity that other people's opinions no longer determine your direction. And maybe the most important part is this: you do not have to know exactly when that moment will arrive. You only have to keep becoming, keep learning, keep growing, keep choosing wisdom over reaction, keep choosing purpose over distraction, keep choosing peace over unnecessary conflict, keep choosing consistency over temporary excitement, keep choosing the future over the identity that belongs to your past. Because the old version of you may have survived by reacting, the new version can begin living by intention, and that is a rise worth having, not a rise that makes everyone jealous, a rise that makes you grateful, not a rise that gives you permission to look down on people, a rise that gives you the wisdom to remain humble, not a rise built on revenge, a rise built on purpose, not a rise designed to prove everyone wrong, a rise that proves to yourself that you are capable of more than fear allowed you to believe. And when your family eventually sees that Perhaps they will not simply see success. They will see the journey. They will see why you had to change. They will understand why some things could not stay the same. They will understand why certain doors had to close. They will understand why you needed quiet. They will understand why you could not keep living according to old expectations. And maybe then they will finally understand the question you were asking all along. Why did I have to become this person? Because the life ahead required a different version of you. That is the deeper message. Your future does not need the old you to remain in control. Your next chapter requires growth, and growth can be uncomfortable. But discomfort does not always mean you are going the wrong way. Sometimes it means you are leaving what is familiar. So do not panic simply because you are changing. Do not apologize for becoming healthier. Do not feel guilty for developing boundaries. Do not feel ashamed for wanting more from yourself. And do not let someone's outdated picture of you become the ceiling over your future. You know what you have survived. You know what you have learned. You know how many times you had to begin again. And if you believe that your next chapter should be built from everything you have learned rather than everything you have lost, write, "I am becoming." 3 simple words, not a promise that everything will instantly change. A declaration that you will no longer treat your growth as something to fear. And as you move forward, remember this. The people who only knew your past may need time to understand your future. Let them. You do not have to drag them into your transformation. You do not have to convince them every morning. You do not have to prove anything through arguments. Build, grow, heal, learn, create. Pray if prayer is part of your faith. Reflect, make wiser decisions, and allow the results of your life to speak in their own time, because there is something incredibly powerful about becoming so grounded that you no longer need to announce your rise. You simply live it. And one day, the same people who once wondered what you were doing may look at the life you built and finally see the connection. The struggle had a lesson. The waiting had a lesson, the change had a lesson, the silence had a lesson, the rebuilding had a lesson, and the person standing here today is the result of all those lessons being carried forward. So if you are in that quiet middle right now, do not assume nothing is happening. A foundation is still progress. A small decision is still progress. A changed habit is still progress. A healed wound is still progress. A boundary is still progress. A new mindset is still progress. And sometimes the most important part of your rise is happening long before anyone else can see it. Your family may eventually understand. Your friends may eventually notice. The world may eventually recognize the result. But before anyone else recognizes the change, you have to recognize it yourself. You have to stop asking whether you are allowed to become different. You are. You have to stop believing that your past has permanent authority over your future. It does not. And you have to stop measuring your journey only by how quickly the results appear. Some of the most meaningful changes take time. So keep going. Not blindly, not recklessly, but intentionally. And if this message found you during a season where you are becoming someone you barely recognize yourself, stay patient with the process. You do not need to have everything figured out today. You only need to make the next honest decision, the next wise decision, the next courageous decision, then another, until one day you look back and realize you are no longer waiting to become the person you imagined. You became them. And perhaps that is the moment your family finally understands. Not because you told them why, but because they can finally see it. They can see the peace. They can see the discipline. They can see the maturity. They can see the courage. They can see the new direction. They can see the life that grew from everything you once thought was only loss. And when that day comes, remember to stay humble. Do not use your rise to punish the people who doubted you. Use it to honor the person who kept going when doubt was all around. Use it to become generous. Use it to become wise. Use it to build something meaningful. Use it to help someone who is still standing where you once stood, because perhaps the greatest evidence of transformation is not that people finally admire you. It is that you no longer need their admiration to know who you are. That is freedom. That is maturity. That is the kind of rise worth protecting, and that is why this chapter matters. Your family may remember who you were, but they do not get to decide who you become. Your past may explain you, but it does not have to define you. Your struggles may have shaped you, but they do not have to limit you. And if your faith tells you that there is purpose in the journey, then keep walking with humility, wisdom, and patience. Because you may be closer to understanding your story than you think. Not because every mystery has been solved, but because you are finally becoming strong enough to understand what the journey was teaching you. So breathe, take a step back, look at how far you have already come, and ask yourself one final question. If the person I am becoming is stronger, wiser, calmer, and more purposeful than the person I used to be, why would I keep trying to become who I was? You wouldn't. And maybe that is the real turning point, the moment you stop trying to return to the old version of yourself. The moment you stop begging the past to make sense. The moment you stop asking everyone else to validate the journey. The moment you decide to move forward. That is where the next chapter begins. And when your family eventually looks at you and finally understands why you had to change, you will know something they could not see before. The greatest transformation was never about making them recognize you. It was about finally recognizing yourself. If this message meant something to you, leave a comment with the words, "I am becoming," and share what you are choosing to leave behind. And if you know someone who is quietly going through a season of change, send this message to them. Sometimes a person does not need another prediction about their future. Sometimes they simply need a reminder that growth can be happening even when nobody else can see it. Keep moving forward, keep becoming, and let the next chapter speak for itself.